Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Question and Answer. And so we're already up into numbers so high that you cannot count them on your fingers and toes unless you have more than the usual number of fingers and toes. And I suppose I should start this with an apology because I was going to do this Q&A last weekend, and this week has just been kind of a weird one. I'm going to be moving in with my sweetheart within the next couple weeks, and already I'm kind of commuting back and forth. So I spent the weekend at her place, soon to be our place, kind of already our place, I suppose. And I was going to do the Q&A there, and I could not find the adapter because Apple computers don't have USB ports anymore. So if you're going to plug in like a camera or a microphone with USB ports, you got to have an adapter. I couldn't find it. I assumed it was still at the apartment. So I was going to do it on Monday. Then on Monday, I went back in the afternoon after work and I couldn't find it there. So then I'm thinking, oh, it's probably just somewhere at the house. Also, Monday morning, I was biting into my breakfast and the cap on my tooth came off. So I was just going to do it snaggletooth and just call it the snaggletooth edition or something. So anyway, my sweetheart she found the adapter and gave it to me. I was going to do it the next day, which I think we're up to like Tuesday, right? Gonna do it on Tuesday. And then I realized that I didn't even have the microphone and the camera here. It was at her house too, soon to be our house. So then I had to wait for another day. And then the next day after that, I was just so exhausted because I didn't get to sleep early enough that I just crashed on the couch with all my clothes on and woke up in a groggy state, which often happens after I take a nap. And so now we're already up to Thursday. So it's just the show must go on. I spent more than 2 hours in a dentist chair this morning getting fake provisional teeth put up front. And so I'm going to get new caps in a couple weeks. So there's that to look forward to. And before I get started on answering questions, I suppose I should do some basic stuff, like direct you to the URL links below where you can find access to all of my existent websites and that sort of thing. And also there are the links to my books down there. And why should you buy my books, you ask? Well, it's kind of an interesting question. I'll just ask the first question myself. Why should you be interested in books that I've written? And it's kind of, in kind of a strange situation as a Buddhist because like with regard to like Orthodox Theravada, in America, I could be considered an authority. I know way more about Theravada Buddhism than not only the average person and not only the average Theravada Buddhist, but even the average teacher of Theravada Buddhism in the West. A lot of them are really surprisingly ignorant of Orthodox Theravadan doctrine. Like the average teacher of Theravada in the West knows some elementary meditation techniques and some of the jargon, which is as often as not mispronounced. And not a whole heck of a lot more than that. If they read books about Theravada Buddhism, they're more likely to read books by Jack Kornfield or somebody like that than to read ancient texts, for example. So, from an American standard, I could be considered somewhat of an authority on Theravada, but if I went to Burma, where you've got just phenomenal scholars that are very dogmatic, but they just memorize the texts by heart. When I was in Burma, there were at least 6 Buddhist monks who had memorized the entire 40-volume Pali Tipitaka. It's 40 volumes in Burmese. in the Burmese edition, the Burmese Sixth Council edition. So I wouldn't be considered much of an authority on Theravada like in Burma at all, especially because I'm not extremely orthodox. There are some things that I just do not take at face value, like Abhidhamma, for example, the third Pitaka of the Tipitaka, of the three baskets of the Pali canon. I reject most of one of them and considerable amounts of the other two. So there is that. But with regard to what Buddhism was like in very early times, I would consider myself to be pretty much of an authority, because I've studied it very intensively and very devoutly, you could say, because I really wanted to follow what the Buddha taught. That was my original intention as a monk. I didn't become a monk in order to follow along with some modern tradition or some medieval Asian tradition. I didn't become a monk because I wanted to live like Burmese monks. I wanted to live like the monks in the Buddhist time. And so you have to do detective work. You have to read the texts very carefully, use dating methods similar to those used by Bible scholars. And like Bible scholars, a lot of theology classes or seminaries will tell you that a large number of epistles that are considered to be by Paul really weren't by Paul, and they use different techniques like for example, if somebody just reliably says bucket instead of pail when they are communicating, and then you've got this document that's attributed to that person that just consistently says pail, then that's a pretty good sign that that's like not by the person that it's attributed to. Just little things like that. Or some scholars have used the Dhammapada they've like analyze the Dhammapada, and they'll say, well, these verses here are in a verse form that did not become popular until hundreds of years after the time of the Buddha, this kind of thing. Or another kind of cynical method is going with prophecies. Any sutta or text that has prophecies that are 100% accurate, then you would, like a cynical and hard-headed type of literary critic would say, well, the text was written, after the fact, and when it gets to the point where the prophecies start becoming wildly, what's the word, inaccurate, then that's about when it was written. This kind of thing. There's all kinds of methods, all kinds of techniques, and I've studied the Pali texts mainly with the intention of finding out what texts are considered to be the closest to the Buddha's time and the closest to what the Buddha actually taught. So there are probably people that know that kind of stuff better than I do, but I do have the advantage of actually living the life and walking the talk, and not simply being an academic sitting in an ivory tower somewhere that just takes a purely intellectual interest in the text, that sort of thing, without having lived the life, without having followed the rules, or without having lived in a culture similar to ancient India. And rural Burma still is relatively similar to ancient India. So you just learn a few things just from living in that culture. But yeah, I mean, if you would like the point of view of somebody who really has studied Buddhism intensively, trying to figure out, what the Buddha originally taught, then and just someone who's maybe kind of strange and relatively intelligent, then yeah, it might be for you. Also, I've been asked to tell everybody, because I am going to be moving soon, that if you have any packages, which does occasionally happen, somebody will try to send me something. Probably best not to do it anytime real soon, because I will be moving to a different address. And I don't want to be stating my address on this video just because people who may not be friendly may exploit that. So anyway, I think I've gone over all the basics, and so I didn't tell you my name maybe this time, but you probably already know. So anyway, I'll just start answering questions, and the first question is from Das Boot. And Das Boot says, if we are engineered by aliens and perhaps even manipulated right now, then what, if any, implications would that have for Buddhism, the Buddha, and Buddhism as an accurate map of reality? Well, I think the main hit that Buddhism would take, if we are controlled, manipulated, engineered by aliens, or maybe we're just living in a simulation or something. You know, some 9-year-old alien child developed like a virtual reality of Earth with us on it as a science project for school or something. The cosmology would really take the hit. I don't think that the ethical philosophy would take much of a hit, because it has been pretty much proven. It has standed the test of time, and even the aliens themselves would be subject to Dhamma. The second noble truth remains true. My friend Brian Rue talks about aliens a lot. He's pretty much just shifted his attention primarily to aliens now. And one of the things that I was able to get across to him is that aliens, if they are superhuman with regard to their intelligence and so forth, their abilities, like they supposedly are telepathic and so forth, then they would be considered devas by Buddhist cosmological terminology. They'd be small g gods, because any being that is significantly higher on the scale than we are would be a small g god. And the gods, the devas, they still respected the Buddha, and supposedly when he was in deep meditative state, even the telepathic ones could not tell upon what his consciousness was resting. He became like invisible to telepaths. But again, if we assume that it's all just like a virtual reality or something, or maybe the aliens just programmed us to believe this or something. But yeah, I think the only real hit that Buddhism would take would be the ancient Indian cosmology that modern Westerners, most of us, don't believe anyway. But the second noble truth stays true: dependent co-arising or dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it stays true, and that the aliens that are manipulating us would be just as subject to universal law as we are. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Dwoh, DWOH. I don't know what that is. But Dwoh asks, what is your best guess to Buddha's ethnicity? Some say he was exiled by Darius and was a Scythian Iranian sage, and Shakyamuni was a perversion of Sakyamuni. Some claim Shakya clan was just Scythians. Yeah, I know a person who interviewed some scholar who is really putting forth this theory in a very strong way, that the Buddha was Iranian, like a Scythian, his family was exiled to India by Darius the Great. And just with regard to the whole Darius thing, and how Buddhism has very strong themes of anti-Zoroastrianism and so forth. I haven't read the book that this scholar has written, and I haven't even seen the podcast that my friend made with this scholar, because I'm pretty sure he hasn't finished editing it yet. But he says that this man has very strong evidence. But still, with regard to that part, with regard to the Scythians being newly planted in India by Darius the Great, I'm very skeptical, mainly because there is zero support for it that I'm aware of in the Pali texts themselves. That the Buddha was supposedly born and raised to the Shakya clan, or in Pali it's Sakya or Sakha, the Sakha clan in what is now Nepal, like southern Nepal. And there's no word whatsoever about Darius, or I don't even remember. I mean, it might be in there, but I don't even remember any mention of Persia in the Pali texts. There is mention of Greeks in the Pali texts, but no mention that I can think of Persia, or especially of Darius the Great, or Darius, or however it is pronounced. So with regard to that, I'm still skeptical. I'll have to see the evidence, but really it's just crickets if you read the Pali text with regard to any kind of support for this, other than maybe he can see that, when the Buddha teaches this, it's sort of like a roundabout jab at Zoroastrianism or something, but it's really not clear cut. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure people would have noticed it by now. It wouldn't take a person in the 21st century to finally notice that. But with regard to his ethnicity, which is the main part of the question here, it could be, and I've considered that the Buddha may have been originally of Scythian ancestry, that there could have been like a wave of Scythian immigrants coming in even before the Indo-Aryans, because the Scythians were more closely related to the Iranians, so they would be like they would be Aryan, but they would be like Iranian Aryan, and the word Iran is just a corruption of the word Aryan. There was a province in Persia that was called Arya also. So he may have been Scythian ancestry, and he was living on like the northeastern frontier of Vedic culture. So he was kind of an outsider, which is one reason why he wasn't simply a Vedic Brahmanist, a proto-Hindu. That could be one reason, is he was just born and raised on like the frontier of Vedic Brahmanism. So he could have been Scythian. I mean, just because he was Scythian if he was Scythian, doesn't mean that it had anything to do with Darius or Darius the Great. There was the Greeks invaded and conquered northwestern India maybe around the 1st century before the Common Era, and the next wave of barbarians who invaded northwestern India were called the Sakas, who were Scythian, and so they were called the Indo-Scythians or something like that. But that was after the Buddhist time. But it does indicate that Scythians who were living sort of to the northwest of India could occasionally make inroads into India, and it could have occurred over centuries. Every once in a while, you would have, I think, the Kambodjas, who are mentioned in the Pali text, along with the Yonas, who were considered to be violent barbarians that would invade occasionally. The Yonas were Greeks. That's Yona, or Yonaka, is the Pali rendering of like Ionian, the Ionian Greeks, who were the ones that were mostly settled in near and in India. But the Kambozas, or the Kambodjas, were supposedly like an Iranian tribe that may have been Scythian. And so yeah, I mean, it is possible. But regardless of whether he was of Sakyan or Scythian ancestry or Indo-Aryan ancestry, I mean, he was Aryan apparently. There are some scholars who say that he may have just been like some indigenous barbarian tribe that was adopted or allowed to enter Vedic culture, and so they were given sort of honorary Aryan status. But I think it's probable that the Buddha had Aryan ancestry. He may not have been pure-blooded, because whenever you have an invasion into a new territory, then inevitably some of the men, there's going to be more men than women at first in the first wave of invasion, and some of the men are just going to settle down with the prettiest and most desirable indigenous females, which to some degree is a good idea, because then the children will have resistance to the local diseases and so forth. But I think in all probability he was like high caste. He was a kshatriya of the noble warrior caste. According to the legend, he was a prince, the son of the king. So he probably was relatively pure-blooded, either Indo-Aryan or some sort of Aryan, possibly Scythian. But I don't think there's any way to really know for sure, unless there are certain ways you could test it now. The Saka tribe, the Shakya tribe, was wiped out just a few decades after the time of the Buddha, by King Ajatasattu, I think. So you couldn't really test the Shakyas now because apparently they're extinct. But you could do like DNA testing in and around like where Kapilavatthu used to be in Nepal, and see if there is any significant Scythian element in the genome. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters all that much. What really matters is what the man had to say. So it's sort of similar with Christianity, whether his mother was a virgin or not, and I rather doubt it. But even if his mother was a virgin, it doesn't really matter what matters is what the man had to say. So let's see. I think I answered that question, which is kind of a long roundabout, semi-educated. I don't know, but he was Indo-Aryan or Persian Aryan, one or the other, mostly, I would guess. So let's just move on to the next question by DWOH Duo. Another question is, do you think you will research Nirvana in this lifetime? I think that means reach. Do you think you will reach Nirvana in this lifetime, or is that more or less impossible where you are? I'm kind of a novice, so I get this might seem silly since I think Nirvana is seen as a big deal in Buddhism and very few reach it. I've kind of answered this question before. If like with regard to the question of do I think I will attain enlightenment in this life, I don't want to just say no and close the door in my own face, because anything is possible. But to say yes is kind of arrogant. I was pretty arrogant when I first became a monk. I had these ideas. I'll master jhana within 6 months. This kind of stuff. Red Bull, because I've had a long day, and things just don't turn out the way they are planned. But you shouldn't. It's best not to even think about it. You just do what you do as well as you can. And if it happens, it happens. There's no way to really force it to happen anyway. Like Krishnamurti used to say, you can open the window, but you can't cause the breeze to blow in. So who knows? Maybe I'll become enlightened at the moment of death or something. Ramana Maharshi said that happens a lot. I guess Eckhart Tolle says that too. And he's a layperson. So, sorry to disappoint Duo with 2 I don't knows, but gotta be honest here, I don't want to just start making grandiose claims, or alternately slam the freaking door in my own face. But Duo is correct that Nirvana is seen as a big deal in Buddhism and very few reach it, especially lately. There was a very sarcastic author who claimed to be fully enlightened. What was his name? Jed McKenna, or that's supposedly his name. There's people have tried to locate this Jed McKenna, and he's nowhere. There's no pictures of him anywhere on the internet or any such thing. But he was saying that spirituality is just it's just one of the greatest fiascos of human creation, because so few people succeed in becoming enlightened. You dedicate your life to following, Buddhism or Hinduism or yoga or some esoteric some kind of esoteric Christianity or whatever it is, Sufism, and I mean, the percentage of people that actually succeed in becoming enlightened, even to those who are really trying diligently to become enlightened, is just a tiny fraction of 1% in all likelihood. But most people just aren't right for it, and most people, even those who are dedicated and really trying deep down, they just aren't ready. They're kind of afraid of it or something. I used to think when I was a monk in Burma that if somebody somehow invented an enlightenment pill, where you just take this pill and swallow it and you become fully enlightened, you would attain nirvana, that most monks even would run away from that as though it were some kind of demon-possessed rabid snake, because most people are just afraid of enlightenment, because in a sense it's like death. You know, who you think you are kind of dissolves, or at least you completely detach, or it's sort of like death. So yeah, let's just move on. I mean, you're best not even really thinking about that sort of thing, because any kind of idea you have about nirvana is going to be invalid. Nirvana cannot be understood intellectually. It's just trying to understand the absolute. You know, it's like trying to figure out God, trying to draw a picture of God Almighty. It just doesn't work. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Anonymous. And Anonymous says, I would humbly ask Panyo Basa to do an article or video regarding what are the states of the afterlife, how best to prepare, or what is expected to happen thereafter. I understand there are philosophical, epistemological, and semantic terminology outside of my scope here. This will have to be explained simply, not just for myself or that thing I identify with, known as me or self. It doesn't exist, but is conditioned by karmic states. So what happens after you die is essentially the question, I'm pretty sure. I can tell you what Orthodox tradition teaches, and that is that at the moment of death, whatever state you are in, I mean, that's including all of your karma, which is it's the momentum of your mind. It's like the momentum of the flow of consciousness. That at the moment of death, that disappears, you know, from your body, and has to instantaneously, the very next moment, reappear at the conception of a new being. And the new being, if it's like a biological being, like a human, you know, you have to go through the gestation inside your mama's belly and all that. But hell realms and most heaven realms, you just spontaneously appear. That would be and it's like there has been a little bit of controversy over the last moment, the last conscious moment, how according to Abhidhamma, that imprints, like your last conscious moment is imprinted throughout the rest of your life. Like if you are like in a sound sleep, your mind just has this test pattern, which is the last image of your conscious mind in the previous life, which I am very skeptical of that. I really, like I said at the beginning, I'm skeptical of Abhidhamma. I do not consider it to be the genuine, reliable, authentic teachings of Gautama Buddha. So, you know, there isn't the same sort of thing like in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Or in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's the Bardo realm, where it's like an intermediate state where you go there and you have to like review your life, or there's a number of things, you know, you go and pass through the bright light, and then you're seeing all these beings. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead reminds you that you need to remind yourself it's all just like mental constructs. It's all my imagination. They're not real beings. Even if you see the Buddha himself or whatever. There really isn't that sort of thing in Buddhism, although I do think that you could have like an intermediate state that is just it could just be like a short existence in some sort of relatively unstable, non-physical realm. And maybe it's your karma to be reborn as a prince in your next life or something. And it may not be that there are any princes being conceived at that exact moment. So yeah. With regard to my own opinion as to what happens after death, it's like I'm getting a lot of questions that I honestly have to answer. I don't know, because I do not remember having died before and gone into any other realm. I don't remember passing through any afterlives. And so I think there's a good chance that there really is rebirth or reincarnation, which for some reason Buddhists don't like the word reincarnation. They prefer rebirth, although essentially it means the same thing. But I think it's largely a matter of similarity. If your mind is very similar to somebody else's mind, there's like an overlap. And it could be that your existence just I'm just getting lost here. I really am. It's been a long day. I need more Red Bull. Let's just back up a little and say, technically, the only thing that passes from one life to the next is karma, which is like the momentum of your mind. And I've compared that in the past to like pushing down a lump in a carpet. If the carpet's got this lump, it's an imperfectly fitted carpet. You try to push it down in one place, it'll just immediately push up somewhere else. And we are imperfectly fitted in this universe because we're continually struggling against it and wanting things to be different and so forth. And so when we get pushed down at death, it just pushes up somewhere else because there's this disequilibrium that hasn't worked itself out yet. And exactly how that works, I cannot say, although I kind of doubt that it's exactly the way the books say, especially the Abhidhamma books. So, sorry to be so unhelpful. I can just tell you what the books say, and you can take it or leave that, and I don't fully believe what the books say. Or you can just have some meandering theorization on my part. But as I say, I don't remember having died before, so. But then again, in Buddhism, you die every moment. It's like everything is flashing in and out of existence 1 trillion times a second. Or mental states are flashing in and out like 17 trillion times per second. So, I'll just go on. Anonymous continues here. Our karmic state at that point of death, formed through our experiences, is thus continued in a renewed manifestation based on that state. One either gets closer to what is considered as enlightened ultimate reality or further away. Would this be a correct interpretation? Please explain. And then he's got ELI5 in parentheses, which I don't understand. So, let's see. He says, our karmic state at that point of death, formed through our experiences, is thus continued in a renewed manifestation based on that state. One either gets closer to what is considered as enlightened ultimate reality or further away. I think it would be kind of a simplistic interpretation. I mean, the state you're in at the moment of death, it's not just referring to the conscious mental state, because there's all the latent karma that's there too. It's just below the surface. So all of that would have to be taken into consideration. And one either gets closer to what is considered as enlightened ultimate reality or further away. If you are destined to become enlightened, then it seems like whether you're going to heaven or hell, you're still getting closer to enlightenment, at least on the timeline. So that's kind of a gratuitous little monkey wrench to throw into this theory. Our karmic state at that point of death, formed through our experiences, is thus continued in a renewed manifestation based on that state. If you take into consideration the whole stream, including the the currents below the surface, then that would be fairly accurate. I hope these questions get easier. These are some difficult questions. It's like, I don't know. But I have to be honest. I mean, I'm not just going to sit here and decree exactly what happens to you after death when I myself really have no direct experience of what happens after death, at least not at the conscious level. So, next question is from Matthew. And Matthew asks a very straightforward question, which is appreciated. How does Buddhism approach marriage and divorce? I recognize that Theravada is essentially a religion for renunciants, but what kinds of norms have developed in Burma, Sri Lanka, Thailand that could be said to derive from Buddhism? As a layperson, how might Buddhism guide when marriage should occur, sex, children, love, and when divorce is acceptable? Adultery, not getting along, growing apart? Okay. I will point out that there are a few suttas in which the Buddha gives advice on how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife. And I never had much interest in that. I wasn't much interested in that as a monk because, of course, I was a monk and wasn't planning on getting married at the time. So, I mean, the Buddha does kind of toss a bone to lay people and give them instructions or advice on how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife, how to be a good master of your servants and slaves, that sort of thing. And how to be a good slave or servant even. He gives advice to those people also. But he doesn't really go into a lot of details because it was just like a side issue. In fact, in a country like Burma, which is possibly the most devoutly Buddhist country on earth at the present moment, marriage is just it's a purely secular affair. It's not really a Buddhist marriage because there is a Sangha-disesa rule. It's the second most serious level of offense for a monk is to commit Sangha-disesa. So he's not excommunicated, but he's got to take penance for 6 days and 6 nights and go through this elaborate ceremony with at least 20 monks there other than him to put him back into good standing after the penance is finished. And it's really a pain in the neck. I've done it before, not because I was involved in anyone getting married, but for other reasons. And to participate in a marriage is a Sangha-disesa offense. It's a very serious offense. So monks do not participate in marriages. The monks are not allowed to encourage people to get married. They're not allowed to if a man and a woman get divorced, they're not allowed to encourage them to get remarried. Although if they're just fighting, they can be peacemakers with regard to that. But yeah, it's purely a secular affair with the actual marriage itself. In Burma, the villagers will just go to the village headman and sign some papers, and that's it. They're married. And then after that, then they'll have the big reception and invite monks and feed monks in order to earn merit and listen to a sermon in order to earn merit. And the monks can bless the marriage after it's a done deal. But before the marriage, they're not. They can't bless the marriage. So it's Buddhism, like Theravada Buddhism originally was primarily intended for renunciants. It was just this radical method for renunciation, and the lay people were, they were sort of quasi-Buddhists. They were supporting the heavy hitters, but they were not considered to be likely to become enlightened. And even if they did become enlightened, according to the tradition, they had to become ordained immediately or they would die. So, yeah, I mean, people really don't appreciate, especially in the West, I guess, people just do not appreciate how, like, monk-centric early Buddhism was, where really, like, in the Buddhist time, it was the renunciants were the real Buddhists, and the lay people might support them, but they were like fans supporting their favorite team. And like nowadays, you got someone who might be really into some sports team, and they'll wear the shirt, and they'll pay for the tickets, which supports the athletes, and they'll even play ball, in their backyard or something, throw the ball around, that kind of thing. So they're kind of, doing the sport, but not at the same level as the professionals. And Westerners are often insulted by that, especially Americans, I think, because Americans want the best of everything if they can get it. And so they kind of, the American Buddhists can feel insulted if, just by the very idea of monks. Some Western Buddhists who consider themselves to be practicing Buddhists are just resentful of monastics, because it's sort of like a suicide. Some people resent others who commit suicide. It's like it's the coward's way out. They're throwing away this divine gift or whatever. And when a monk is ordained, it's kind of similar to suicide. They're throwing away what most people value the most. And also, it's just kind of a slur on Western Buddhists. It somehow suggests that mediocrity isn't good enough. So, but I've kind of strayed away from the question here, and I'm occasionally getting twinges of self-consciousness about the missing tooth, but it's not missing because I got like a temporary one put in this morning. Let's see. Yeah, I guess, how does Buddhism approach marriage and divorce? It just kind of doesn't exactly ignore it. I'm not even sure if, I can't remember divorce even being mentioned. Like, it was ancient Indian culture, and a woman was just pretty much owned by her husband. So, women were allowed to leave their husbands. Nuns, there's a rule of monastic discipline that a nun is not allowed to leave her husband and become a nun unless she has been married for X number of years. I think it was 7 or 9 or 12 or something, 12 maybe. And she's got to do her duty and maybe give her asshole of a husband some children before she renounces the world or some such. But it really is kind of an afterthought, marriage and divorce, because it was the renunciants that were, most of the texts are geared towards the renunciants, and of course they weren't even allowed to touch a woman, much less marry one. I assume men would just be encouraged to leave their wives and be ordained. So yeah, it's not really a good model for basing any kind of Buddhist family ethic or monks just are forbidden to even participate in a wedding. So you're not going to have Buddhist weddings except for by the layperson. You got this guy named Ralph who got ordained somehow as maybe a Zen monk or something, and he just wears lay clothing, and he can do marriages. You're barefoot in the park or something. But like the earliest schools of Buddhism, like Theravada and pre-Theravada, it was just a complete no-no. It was just if you're a husband, try to be as good of a husband as you can. If you're a wife, try to be as good of a wife as you can. Be moral, keep 5 precepts and so forth. But that's about as far as it goes. So I'll just move on to Matthew's next question. And he says, topic: Buddhist monks and nationalism. The Burmese, but especially the Sinhalese monks, have in recent years shown a willingness to engage as defenders of their cultures. If only they had done that in Gandhara many moons ago, perhaps Afghanistan would be a shining light instead of Satan's armpit. With that said, I have never read a single line of text in the Tipitaka that would even be twisted or contorted to justify support for violence, defensive or otherwise. How do we protect Buddhism? Was Buddhism meant to survive on its own? Does Buddhism require a non-Buddhist Kshatriya warrior class surrounding and defending it? Is Buddhism and Dhamma as we know it one Muhammad part 2 away from disappearing? As a Buddhist, should I even care? And then he's got detachment in parentheses. So that's a good question. And it is true that in Burma sometimes the monks will do protests, and my experience is that the monks that are marching in the streets tend to be the sloppiest, most lax monks who are getting into politics instead of minding their own business and just practicing Dhamma. As a general rule, I mean, it's not like I'm just making this opinion, just pulling it out of an orifice. I mean, I lived in Burma for many years, and it's true that most of the monks that are political activists are just really lax, sloppy monks. I had a guy just almost hit me once, where he was, he introduced himself to me. He was an American guy. He introduced himself to me as one of the world's leading authorities on Burma, despite the fact that he didn't speak Burmese. And he's an advisor to the U.S. government, or had been at some point in the past. And he'd been to Burma 20-something times, and he was married to a Burmese lady, but I think they got divorced after I met him. But he was talking about these exemplary monks, and that he had met when he was in Burma. And he's talking about political protests against the military dictatorship, or there's a monk who's running an orphanage, or there's a monk who's running a school, or there's a monk who's fundraising for disaster relief and so forth. And he didn't mention anything at all about actual Buddhist practice, like meditation or following the rules or anything. And I'm just telling him, yeah, they might be really good people. They might be really nice people, but they're not very good monks, because, I mean, they're just going against what they're supposed to be doing. If you're a monk, you're supposed to be striving single-mindedly for enlightenment, preferably in solitude out in a forest somewhere, and just not having anything to do with politics. It's like the forbidden animal talk. There's a long list of topics that monks aren't supposed to talk about, and one of the very first ones is kings or ministers. It's like any kind of politics is I mean, it's poison for monks, supposedly. Let's see. So I'll just have to read the question again, because I've been rambling here. Let's see. The Burmese, but especially the Sinhalese monks, have in recent... Yeah, Sinhalese monks are pretty lax, too, on average. Have in recent years shown a willingness to engage as defenders of their cultures. If only they had done that in Gandhara many moons ago, perhaps Afghanistan would be a shining light instead of Satan's armpit. Yeah, well, in a way, they're kind of renouncing the culture if they're serious monks. With that said, I have never read a single line of text in the Tipitaka that would even be twisted or contorted to justify support for violence, defense, or otherwise. Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, a monk, even an ordained monk, a serious one, is allowed to strike out in self-defense. Not with the intention of killing, but, I mean, if you're just fighting desperately to save your life and you accidentally kill the other person, then, yeah, you haven't even committed an offense, really. So, it's the intention to kill that's I mean, if you do that, then you're excommunicated for life. If you deliberately kill somebody, regardless of the reason. I mean, it might be a justified reason. Maybe you're killing a terrorist who's about ready to blow up a school bus full of children. And by killing the terrorist, you save the lives of everybody else. But still, it is forbidden to kill another human being deliberately. Maybe you just jump on him and keep him from pushing the button or something. So how do we protect Buddhism? The standard Buddhist answer to that would be have good karma. You do good and do right, and you're more likely to have good things happen to you. I mean, Buddhism has been radically pacifist from the beginning, for the most part, and it still exists after 2,500 years. I mean, the numbers have gone down, especially when Islam invaded India and also Central Asia, which was predominantly Buddhist, and then you had Chinese communism pretty much wipe out Buddhism in China. But like the 4th century of the Common Era, I have read that most human beings on the planet were Buddhists, at least nominally. At least they were members of a Buddhist culture, because India, China, and pretty much all of Asia in between was mostly Buddhist at the time. So, Yeah, how do we protect Buddhism? Well, you would have to do it through good instead of bad. So that can be done. Let's see, was Buddhism meant to survive on its own? Buddhism couldn't possibly survive on its own. Partly because, like, everybody couldn't just become a monk. You know, monks aren't allowed to even feed themselves. They have to be fed by people who aren't following the rules as strictly as them. And so there's always going to be violent people who just aren't going to be saints or saintly. And ideally, those violent people will be patriotic and defend their culture. There are violent people who are patriotic. I mean, that used to be the hero, like the ancient Greeks. That was like the main culture heroes were fighters, patriotic fighters. See, how do we protect Buddhism? You know, let's see, was Buddhism meant to survive on its own? Does Buddhism require a non-Buddhist Kshatriya warrior class surrounding and defending it? Well, it could be like semi-Buddhist, where, you know, like the Burmese military government. Technically, they're Buddhists. You know, they're soldiers, generals. You know, but it's sort of like the mafia, where the mafia are Catholic, supposedly. You know, they might refrain from offending nuns, but still, they're relatively bad guys. And history has shown that really devout followers of a religion can be just ruthless, violent people. So, I think Genghis Khan was considering becoming a Buddhist, wasn't he? Kublai Khan certainly did. And he was still in massive conquest mode. So, let's see. Is Buddhism and Dhamma as we know it, one Muhammad part 2 away from disappearing? Well, that depends on the karma of the Buddhists, I suppose. And I think the sloppy monks that are doing the protest marches aren't really helping. And if they want to pick up a gun and start fighting the enemies of Buddhism, they should drop out of the monkhood. And if they had succeeded in killing somebody, they would be instantaneously expelled from the monkhood, whether anybody found out about it or not. So as a Buddhist, should you even care, I would suggest just have faith in your karma and do your best. You know, mind your own garden, and the big picture will take care of itself. But if it's your karma to be to enjoy the benefits of Dhamma, then it'll happen. Okay, so I think I answered that question from Matthew, and I'll just move on to Matthew's next question, which is, given that I possess mankind's greatest pornography library in my pocket, I got one right here. Pornography library, supposedly. See, where was I? Oh, how might a modern layperson think about practicing right action in this specific context? Well, I think the answer to that would be pretty obvious. I mean, if you're trying to practice right action as a devout Buddhist and trying to be as saintly as possible, then you use the phone for making phone calls, and you don't look up porn on it. Or if you do, some wise guy sends you some porn, then you see it mindfully and observe what comes up in your mind, and then you hit the little delete button. But I don't know. I think sometimes pornography could be the lesser of two evils. I mean, I've considered writing a blog post about this. I used to think about it a long time ago, before I was even a monk probably. I used to just write an article just pointing out that for some people, certainly not everyone, but for some people, just resorting to porn in your own right hand might actually be preferable to settling down with a member of the opposite gender. Because I mean, for some people, I mean, you want to be on your own. You want to be detached, and you could probably do that better just wanking to some porn every now and then than just marrying someone that deep down maybe you don't feel right about or something. I mean, maybe you just don't feel right about marrying anybody. So, yeah, it could be the lesser of two evils. If you're just too horny, too lustful, to just go without any kind of sexuality, then yeah, maybe. But if you really want to be a saintly, devout, correctly practicing Buddhist, or maybe not even saintly, but just following the 5 precepts and everything, yeah, well, no, I just kind of led myself to looking at porn really doesn't violate any of the 5 precepts that I can think of. Even wanking doesn't. For a monk, it's strictly prohibited, but yeah, spanking the puppy is out. But for a layperson, you know, it's way more liberal, if you'll forgive the word. Just 5 precepts is pretty straightforward. So let's see. Yeah, so if you're a modern layperson and you want to practice right action in this specific context, then the obvious answer is you just don't look at porn. Maybe don't even play with your own pee-pee, I don't know. But as I say, most people are relatively lustful. It's a fascinating subject, sexuality. And yeah, it wasn't easy for me. And I'm very happy that I have a mate now, I have to admit. Maybe straying dangerously close to TMI range. Let's see here. What is your person? Oh, okay, I think I already skipped that one. All right, next question. What is your personal opinion regarding the frequency and ease at which individuals are described as having achieved enlightenment during the Buddha's lifetime? Do you think this is an example of taking liberties by later authors to demonstrate the Buddha's excellence as an instructor, or do you take at face value more or less? This is a naughty question. It's something I've considered many times. I don't think I have it here. I'll look around. Ugh. Yeah, I don't think I have it here. I've got a notebook where I recorded some really outrageous stuff that I've come across as a monk. And one was stories of some Buddha of past ages who delivers a sermon to like literally like trillions of people, and all of them become enlightened. You know, all 10 trillion of them supposedly. And yeah, I don't think so. I don't think the people in back could probably even hear him very well. Yeah, so if you read the text, you'll read that there were lots and lots of enlightened followers of the Buddha, and I would guess that is at least somewhat exaggerated, considering the low rate of enlightenment subsequently, as we've already discussed a little bit. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that he had a lot of enlightened disciples, but even the Buddha had some very unenlightened ones. Like in the rules of monastic discipline, there's continual mention of the group of 6 who were just really crummy monks. They're always getting into trouble and doing bad things and so forth. And then there was Devadatta, who tried to kill the Buddha. So even the Buddha didn't have a 1,000 batting average with regard to enlightening his disciples, although he did way better than Jesus of Nazareth did, apparently. Yeah, so I think this is an example of taking liberties by later authors to demonstrate the Buddha's excellence as an instructor? Yeah, I have to admit it. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, he had, you know, a reasonably large number of enlightened disciples, but yeah, when you're getting up into thousands and millions and billions and so forth, then I start getting rather skeptical. And it's not just enlightened beings. I mean, the Pali texts grotesquely exaggerate like the number of people who become Aryas. Like, I think it's in the commentarial tradition. The commentaries say that the population of Savatthi, which was a major metropolis in the Buddhist time, it had millions and millions. It had like it had like 70 million population supposedly, and most of them were Buddhist saints. Which you couldn't even possibly have a population of 70 million in the Iron Age. I mean, just the logistics of getting all the food in and the sewage out and so forth, it just wouldn't work. So yeah, I have to agree. There is quite a lot of exaggeration, and a lot of it is just for the glorification of the Buddha. I mean, there's it happened in other religions too. Obviously, I mean, most notably Christianity, where they deified the founder, made him the creator of the universe. Um, Buddhism, you read the text and there's an awful lot of bragging. You know, the Buddha is just boasting about how wonderful he is and encouraging people to worship him and so forth, which I am skeptical of that too. And yeah, just the entire multitudes are becoming enlightened when they hear him speak. Um, yeah, so I have to agree on that one. Although I'm not just flat out calling it all lies. Um, some of the weird stuff in the text, I mean, uh, I mean, it could be that some rascally monks were just deliberately making shit up. Although a lot of it, it's just sort of lore that it gets built up. I mean, when I was living in Burma as a monk, there were people who sincerely believed that I was fully enlightened. I was told that there was a picture passing around in the city of Monua, which was the largest city to where I was staying, of me levitating over the city. And people just really believed that. And I would tell them, well, I don't think it was me. I don't remember doing that. But yeah, so it's like people just want to believe this stuff. And it's not deliberately lying. You know, it may be that just gradually this weird legend, maybe somebody just told something as deliberately as like a parable or something, and people took it literally or whatever. With regard to the Buddha bragging, I'm sure the people that added that to the texts sincerely, you know, they were just pointing out that that's the way they considered the Buddha to be, and they just put it into his own mouth, assuming that he really would have said that kind of stuff, which I seriously doubt. So, yeah, let's move on to the next. And the next question is from Tyr. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Tyr, which is some a Germanic god. I think it's cognate with Zeus and Jupiter and Jaus Petri. So he was kind of for the Germans, he was a war god, but he started off as a sky god, and a few cultures, including Greece and Rome, turned him into the king of the gods. Okay, so anyway, Tyr says, all right, I'm not done reading your books, which I mentioned and are in the URL links below. I'm not done reading your books, but I have a question. I recently asked Ajahn Punadamo in his live stream about not self. I wasn't certain what his answer meant. I asked another way, but I don't know if he saw the question. The question is, if there is not self, then would you have some existence? I changed it to experience with not self. Is there still some kind of experience? Because not self doesn't sound fun at all. I know it's off the scale, but if there is no self, then who are we watching on your YouTube channel? My apologies in advance if this sounds disrespectful. Much respect. Sadhu. My best explanation is the parable of the block of marble, which if you're familiar with what I say and write, you're probably familiar with that. It's like you take a block of stone, a block of marble. It's of indeterminate size. It's just out in this barren plain. There's nothing to compare it with, so you can't really say how big it is. It's just this sizeless block of stone. And contained inside that block of stone, literally, is every possible statue. You know, every single atom of every, you know, just every molecule is already there, right in the right place. All you got to do is just remove the extra rock. You know, Michelangelo's David's in there, all the topless Venuses. You know, it's like everything. Even impossible statues are in there. So, all it takes is just imagination or perception to see that statue in the rock. You know, like a talented artist, he'll know what he wants to make with that rock. You know, he'll envision it. He'll see the statue in there, and then he'll remove the extraneous rock. So, I would say the absolute, or what in theistic systems are called capital G God, that would be the block of stone. And in fact, the Tao Te Ching, it was after I came up with this idea, I learned that in a really literal translations of the Tao Te Ching, it refers to the Tao as the nameless uncarved block. So all the statues are in there, and some of the statues are so complicated that they become self-referential and start perceiving themselves as like discrete entities, when really it's just a kind of virtual existence that they have. So that's one way of explaining it. Another way, which would be more orthodox, is that a being is like a flame, where the flame exists so long as the conditions for that flame exist, which according to the Boy Scout manual is you've got to have fuel, heat, and oxygen. If those three are together in sufficient quantities, you're going to have flame. And so if you got the conditions for a being there, then it's going to be like a flame, and it's going to be in a constant state of flux, and it's not going to be exactly the same from one moment to the next. And you just call it the same flame with regard to the flame, even though it's completely different from one moment to the next. But it's just a matter of convenience, just a handy label that you stick onto this continually changing thing that is completely conditional. It only exists because of other things. It doesn't have an inherent self-existence. It exists only because of these other conditions that cause it to exist. And even those other conditions, going with Buddhist philosophy, they're the same way. They only exist conditionally because of conditions conditioning them. And the whole thing is just mutually conditioning, virtually existent stuff going on. And we are part of that. So, I don't know, maybe I've just confused you. See, maybe I'll just, if there is not self, then would you have some existence? It would be a virtual conditional existence. Or you could say that the statues really do exist in that block of marble. Like I say, it's, every molecule is already right there in the exact place where it's supposed to be. But for some reason, some of the statues are so complicated that they start thinking that they are self-existent, and they ignore all the extra rock around them and don't consider themselves to just be part of that. All right, so my apologies in advance if this sounds disrespectful. No, not at all. It was a good question, and I hope I answered it. I mean, you got two answers. One is the unorthodox, heretical answer of the block of stone, and the other is the more orthodox answer of sort of using the flame as an analogy, where it's constantly changing. It's not the same flame from one moment to the next, but you just stick the label flame onto it as just a label of convenience. And it's completely conditional, dependent on other conditions to keep it in existence, and it doesn't have a self-essence, a self-existence. It just exists, or seems to exist, because of these conditions, and those conditions are the same way. They seem to exist because of other conditions, and the whole thing is this vast cosmic interlocking system, and you have an infinite number of those systems, even because there's just an infinite number of ways you can have statues in that block of marble, getting back to the heretical answer. So I'm just going to move on to the next question, and that is from Potila. And Potila says, I am considering buying some land with a space to build a kuti, and a kuti is like a little meditation cabin or a hut. So I'll just start over. I am considering buying some land with a space to build a kuti. What do you think of having a sort of decentralized community in which one or two renunciants are supported by a few families? Say, building a small cabin for them on one person's land and others contributing funds to their health, food, and other minimal expenses. A family would need to feed them daily, but it would give a serious monastic or layperson a chance to practice for a while, and the supporting family gets the benefit of offering dana or generosity, charity, and hearing Dhamma instruction. Many of the centers in the West depend on large viharas and retreat centers and think you need big facilities, but starting small might be better, quality over quantity. Really, it is a question about how to work outside the mainstream Buddhist structure of the West, typically Asian communities or leftist struggle sessions. So that's a good idea, and I agree with this. I mean, I've thought of that a lot, where probably the best way to have monks living in the West, serious monks, is you just have somebody that's got like a big plot of land and they've got like this little cabin out in their back field or something, maybe a trailer or something, and they just invite a monk to come and stay there. But you'd have to have a really serious monk doing it. Like most Asian monks wouldn't, I mean, they'd hate it. They like the ceremonies and the groups coming and listening to the discourses and stuff. They're really not so much into just single, like solitary Dhamma practice. Or if they are into solitary Dhamma practice, they can just stay in Asia, where it's much more supported than here. But I do think it's a good idea, and you'd have to find the right monk, I think, because even a serious monk, I mean, I don't want to badmouth serious monks, but a lot of the serious monks I have met, they're kind of borderline hypochondriacs. They just have a lot of health issues, which may be in part due to just their just self-repression, their self-restraint. They're not following their natural impulses, which, just going with Freud, even though, I don't think Freud was entirely wrong, but when you're like stifling your natural urges, they don't just go away. They kind of build up pressure until they start percolating up to the surface from your subconscious in the form of neurotic symptoms, and that can include psychosomatic illnesses or even, genuine illnesses. It's not just all in your imagination. So a lot of monks, they might be very serious, and then you might invite them to stay at your, in your cabin or something, and they're going to be having stomach problems, and they're going to have to be seeing doctors and so forth, and it's not going to work very well unless you got lots of money for that sort of thing, or you get them on an insurance plan or something. And you'd have to use some discretion in finding the right monk. A lot of monks that are very solitary and so forth, they also may be very frustrated, they're just maybe better off just being in total isolation somewhere. They can be very serious monks because they don't have all the temptations surrounding them that you find so easily in the West, and is even considered to be pretty much necessary. Even just to live in a hut is largely illegal in the West. You have to have like the emergency exit and electricity, and you got to have the electrical sockets, every X number of feet and everything. And I tried this in the West before as a monk, and it didn't work out very well, although it's probably just that I had not good enough karma for it to work out. By the time somebody was starting to offer such things for me, it was already, I'd already reached the point of no return. I'd already made up my mind that being a monk wasn't working for me very well, especially in the West. So, but yeah, if you find the right monk, and he can be Asian or Western, and you just have a place for him to stay, and it has been done before. It could be a really good deal. And then if he's a really good monk and a good teacher besides, then people might be very impressed by his demeanor and his skill at explaining things, and it could build up into something bigger. But I do think that is a good idea, and I encourage Potila to go ahead and do it. So I'll move on to Potila's next question. Do you plan to do more readings of your favorite texts? Yeah, actually, I do. In fact, maybe I should do one of those after I finish this. The thing is, I have to work for a living now. I'm not a member of the leisure class anymore. And, I work 5 days a week and I come home usually pretty tired and not at my best. So even though I do have maybe a couple hours of time in the evenings, a lot of the time I'm tired and my mind's a little bit foggy just from, having worked all day. And so, yeah, my output of this sort of thing, it has not been optimal. But I've written enough translations that I could read my own translations. So there's that, and I do have some favorite suttas, and probably do some more Mahayana stuff too. Just because there are some aspects of Mahayana philosophy that I have a lot of respect for. I think Nagarjuna rocks, for example. So, do you plan to do more readings of your favorite texts? Yes, the answer to that is yes. Just be patient. And I am gradually getting used to working for a living, and I don't come home nearly as exhausted as I used to. My first couple months, I was starting to think maybe I'm just going to be like this for the rest of my life, just come home just exhausted. But I'm getting used to it now. I'm sort of building up resistance or something, tolerance. Okay, anyway, next question from Potila. In your readings, how does the Buddhist term Dhamma differ from the Vedic Hindu Dharma? You stated that you think the only enlightened saints recently have come out of the Hindu tradition. What keeps you studying Buddha Vachana, or the words of the Buddha, instead of a Hindu tradition that may inspire you? Well, actually, that's not entirely correct. I haven't stated that I think the only enlightened saints recently have come out of the Hindu tradition, although I have stated that in the past 100 years, the two people that I would consider the most likely candidates for arahant or enlightened being status would be two Hindus. That would be Neem Baba and Ramana Maharshi. Although, I'm not at all saying that that Buddhists can't become enlightened anymore. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever say that. I might be skeptical of how many become enlightened, but then I can be skeptical of how many Hindus become enlightened too. So what keeps me studying Buddha Vachana instead of a Hindu tradition that may inspire you? The Hindu tradition it's a little garish and too much emphasis on gods, whereas Buddhism it's very philosophical and like psychological, and it does mention small g gods, but they're not to be prayed to or anything really. Maybe honored as superior beings. Let's see. So, I have said before that if I weren't a Buddhist, I'd probably be like a Vedantist Hindu. But, Buddhism works for me. It really does. It's just a philosophical system that does not require a lot of belief in a narrative that you can't possibly prove. And that includes Hinduism. All the talk about the gods, you can say, well, Vishnu is a metaphor, but then again, that you've already kind of undermined the whole thing. You got to have faith in such a system, and I just don't have that kind of faith. That's one reason why I'm not a Christian. It's just you have to believe that. Even if you don't believe in Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, all the suffering in the world is caused by a man made from soil and a woman made from a bone being tricked by a snake and eating a certain kind of fruit. Still, you have to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that he died as an atonement for original sin, and you got to believe in him. And I just cannot believe that a Hebrew carpenter, like a Jewish carpenter who turned miracle rabbi, obviously he was a spiritual person, went and was converted to a more spiritual life by John the Baptist, maybe, and maybe became leader of the group after John the Baptist was arrested. But I just can't believe that he was the savior of the world and the Son of God and the Logos who created the cosmos and all that. So it's kind of the same with Hinduism. there's just too much of that kind of faith orientation, unless maybe you get into something really refined and ethereal like Vedanta. But Buddhism works for me, so I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I guess that may be the answer to that question. So I'll move on to Potila's next question. And the next question is, recently you've written much about Westerners who insist there is a soul or self in Buddhism. Why do you think this is so persistent in some Westerners? Is it just profound attachment to concepts from Christian heritage or something else? Did you run into this position in Asia? The more than 20 years that I lived in Asia, I cannot recall any serious Buddhist claiming that there is a soul in Buddhism. It strikes me as, if not entirely a Western position, then predominantly one. And I should point out, I should clarify that a soul, I'm talking about like an individual personal soul. You know, like in Christianity, each person has their own soul. I'm not talking about some interpretations of Mahayana Buddhism where they're talking about the Dharmakaya or the Tathagata Garbha or the one mind, you know, the Buddha nature or something that is, it's like the underlying ultimate reality that is the foundation of everybody else. It'd be like the block of stone in the metaphor, the simile of the block of stone. That could be the Dharmakaya to a Mahayana Buddhist. Although, from my interpretation, you know, it's the absolute cannot really be said to exist or not exist. You know, anything that is infinite and formless, it just kind of fades out into something that is, you can't really say is or isn't. So that's my approach. I should have said that earlier on with regard to the marble. But now I got to get back here to this question. Why do I think this is so persistent in some Westerners? Is it just profound attachment to concepts from Christian heritage or something else? I don't think it's necessarily Christian. I think Christians might believe that in the West just because there's already a propensity to believe in an intrinsically real individual. So that might be why the Christian idea of souls became so popular. It wasn't that we believe it because of Christianity. It's just that Christianity became popular because it just kind of fit in with this predisposition. And I think it's partly just the Western mind is more individualistic. You know, the Eastern mind is more family oriented, where you might identify more with your family than with your own person. But the West has become individualistic and also just intellectual, where people just insist on perceiving everything and considering those perceptions to be true. And mysticism really never struck much traction in the West. You know, there were like the mystery cults that you had Plotinus. You know, you had a few mystics in like paganism, and then Christianity came along, and mysticism was practiced maybe by a few isolated saints, and it was starting to get more popular like around the 15th century, and then Protestantism came along and just kicked it in the head. So people are just stuck in a kind of samsaric intellectualism, and no self really, like I've been trying to, it's like beating my head against a wall trying to explain no self, because it's really just a matter of not reifying the absolute. And I guess that's just with regard to like the Vedantist, you know, universal soul, the Dharmakaya kind of a thing, because Buddhism just does not teach individual souls. I'm unaware of any text. Some people will say, well, the Buddha taught souls because of the Dharmakaya or something, but that's just one soul with all beings sharing the same one. Some Mahayana teaches that, but with regard to saying that there are ultimately intrinsically real individual souls, with each being having its own different soul, yeah, I'm unaware of any text that really promulgates that in Buddhism. So yeah, I just think it's a combination, or my best guess, it's a combination of just the individuality that is ingrained in us, either culturally or even maybe genetically, and also just this insistence on figuring out samsara intellectually, which also is largely a Western thing. I think the Indians did that too, but they were it was largely like Indo-European traditions that led them in that direction. So, what do you think is so persistent in some Westerners? Yeah, I mean, with regard to some individual Westerners, they seem to be very vehement about it too. It's not just I hypothesize, it's just my personal opinion that we've got souls. And some of them I assume are like that, but some of them they're just. I had one person in the comments section to my blog that was just raging against me, saying that I was a Satan worshiper or a Mara worshiper, that I was just going to hell because I was teaching no self, which is essentially what Buddhism teaches. And he was apparently a Buddhist too, but I don't know. Some people just get really worked up over it. It's just this. Maybe it's individualism is just taken to the point of you have to believe that you're ultimately real, or you just freak out. I don't know. It's that's my best guess. I can't really say because I don't really feel that way. Okay, next question. Oh, this is a fun one. Also by Potila. Are you now a certified forklift operator? If not, when will you be? Oh, I'm sorry I don't have my wallet here. I'd pull out the card and just flaunt it. But yeah, I don't have my wallet here. But yes, I am a certified forklift operator. Although there are different levels to it. I'm kind of like a newbie. I can run, there's 5 forklifts at work. And 2 of them I can do pretty much whatever I want. Then there's 2 bigger ones, the cats, that are mainly just for lifting really heavy, multi-ton coils of steel. And I can use the big ones for various things, but I'm not certified to be moving around the biggest, heaviest coils of steel. And then there's this weird science fiction-y thing called the Moffat. It's got 3 wheels, and it can crab walk. It can move sideways. It looks like something out of a science fiction movie. And there's only a few guys that are certified to operate that one. But yeah, I am certified. I'm somebody now. Nobody's gonna mess with me because I got a forklift certification. Okay, next question. Also by Potila. Panyo, in one video you mentioned that demons and other beings of the hell realms are manifested by one's own karma. In a sense, they are NPCs, beings with no karma or cetana of their own. Is it possible, according to the Theravada sources, that there are humans, quote unquote, who are manifested in the same way, NPC-looking humans, or humans who don't have all the features of a normal human existence? We hear stories like this in paranormal settings, like the Men in Black or a ghost warning someone, etc. Well, I should clarify a little bit. I was just saying that I think it's the commentarial tradition, which I don't really consider to be authoritative. The commentarial tradition says that the demons in hell that are doing all the poking with pitchforks and stuff, the cutting with adzes, and the boiling people in pitch and so forth, they're not really there. They're just manifestations of the karma and the perceptions of the denizens of the hell realms. And strangely, my father, who was a hypnotist, hypnotized a woman, and she was like astral traveling or something, and she wound up in what seemed like a prison where there's these beings, human-like beings in this prison, and they're just, crying and trying to get out, and they're just like, they don't want to be prisoners. And then the guide of this woman who was in a trance just waved his hand through the bars, and then he took her hand and waved her hand through the bars, just to demonstrate that these bars were just the creations of the minds of the people who were there, imprisoned by those bars of their own device. But getting on with this, also this person, he was a German monk, was telling me that according to the commentaries, not only the beings in hell, but unfortunately also the celestial nymphs in heaven are, they're like NPCs. They're just really nobody there. It's just like a virtual being that's conjured up by your karma. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I have made the statement before that technically you could say that an enlightened being could be like an NPC in a strange way, like a super NPC, because they really don't have that. They're not making karma, and because they're not making karma, they're really not generating chaitanya or will. And so, like going with Saint John of the Cross, his definition of a perfect being is one who no longer is acting on their own self-will, but is just like an empty vessel of the Spirit of God, who's like a divine puppet and acting in accordance with divine will. So you could say somebody like that, I mean, translated into Buddhist terminology without the capital G, God, that that somebody like that could possibly be considered, nobody there. Like Ram Dass used to say about his guru, Neem Karoli Baba, who, as I have already mentioned tonight, it would be one of my best bets or best guesses for a fully enlightened being who lived in the past 100 years. Ram Dass said that the better you got to know him, the more you realize that there really wasn't anybody there. He was just like a mirror reflecting your own karma back at you. So there is that as a possibility, although I don't think Potila had enlightened beings in mind. It is possible. I mean, anything that you can imagine is possible, and a lot of things you can't imagine are also possible, at least in a metaphysical sense. So, let's see, let's try and get to the question so I don't answer the wrong one. Is it possible, according to the Theravada sources, that there are humans who are manifested in the same way? NPC-looking humans, or humans who don't have all the features of a normal human existence? Yeah, I think in Orthodox Theravada, I mean, aside from arahants or enlightened beings, I don't think there is mention of that. I don't see why it would be impossible. I mean, if it's supposed to happen in hell and in heaven, why not here too? But yeah, I do not recall reading anything about just like projections, or what are they called in parapsychology, like an apparition. Yeah, I mean, just an apparition that isn't like a spirit, like a ghost, but it's just conjured up by the karma of the person. I mean, you could say that a hallucination would be like that, or like the beings that you're interacting with in dreams. I mean, that would be at a human level. And yeah, some people, they can be operating in a dreamscape with their eyes open. So yeah, I would not say that it's impossible. In fact, now that I've put it in terms like that, I would say that it's pretty likely that a lot of people are interacting with just figments of their own imagination. Although whether they would weigh something on a scale or not, I don't know. So anyway, next question is from Yuichiro, I think his name is. And this is a strange one. Yuichiro is always asking like the poo-poo caca kind of questions. And this one is, I know necrophilia is wrong, but I don't know exactly why. Why is necrophilia wrong? And it is an interesting question. So it's not a bad question at all. It's just that Yuichiro has kind of a strange set of interests. So he thinks about these things. But I'm not criticizing Yuichiro. I'm sure he's very nice. So I know necrophilia is wrong, but I don't know exactly why. Why is necrophilia wrong? And for those of you who don't know what necrophilia is, it's like sexual attraction to corpses. And I think partly, I mean, I've never really thought about why it's wrong. At least I don't remember having thought about it. But I mean, pretty obviously, it's very creepy and cringy, just thinking about it. So, I mean, first off, it just goes against like innate human nature. The human being is an animal, and we've got lots of instincts, regardless of what lefties will tell you, or even psychologists throughout most of the 20th century. They're saying human beings don't have animal instincts, and we are just loaded with them. Like any kind of emotional response would be instinctive. It's emotional. Boys like girls. You don't have to learn that. I mean, it helps. I mean, you can say that cats, they have a hunting instinct, but I mean, it's sort of nebulous. And if they're raised in a certain way, then they won't chase after mice or anything. But just chasing after a ball of string or whatever, a wadded up ball of aluminum foil, that's or pouncing on each other when they're kittens, that sort of thing, is just acting out animal hunting instincts. And we've got instincts. We are just full of animal instincts. And I am sure there's an aversion to corpses, rotting flesh, and so forth, or a sexual attraction to a corpse. Yeah, I'm sure that would be going against some aspects of human nature. Obviously, having sex with a corpse is not going to reproduce the species. In fact, it's not even pair bonding. And those are like the two main purposes of sex in the human animal, is making babies and then just like forming bonding with another human. Those would be the two biological purposes of it. And necrophilia does neither. So it is like literally unnatural. There's really no good biological reason for it. So I assume that would be part of it, is you're just kind of going against deep instincts that give you like a guilty conscience or kind of mess up your mind to some degree. I think that would be my best guess. I mean, obviously, just the lust from the Buddhist point of view is you're already getting kind of unwholesome. But lust for a corpse is, maybe I shouldn't mention this, but the rules of monastic discipline are so detailed, especially with regard to the most serious rules, including sex, that there are all these test cases, like law books have. And so there's stories of monks who go to a charnel field, which is where corpses are simply thrown on the ground to decompose or be eaten by animals. And the monks are so sexually frustrated and horny, that they have sex with the corpse, and that is worthy of excommunication. And there's even these weird cases. There's like a monk finds a severed head lying there, and he sticks his penis into the severed head's mouth. Does that qualify excommunication? And according to the texts, and this is like ancient Pali texts, it's if the lips are still intact enough that the penis makes contact with the lips, then yes. But if there's like no lips left, then it's still a serious offense, but it's not really grounds for excommunication. So there's all this kind of weird stuff. Because they really didn't want to leave any ambiguity with regard to what is and is not worthy of excommunication. So they had all these stories or sample stories, examples that I guess a lot of them are just made up. But getting back to the question, why is necrophilia wrong? Lust in itself, from the Buddhist point of view, you're already playing with fire, and lust for no good reason other than just lust for lust's sake is not so good. Yeah, let's just go with the human nature. It's just a violation of deep human instincts, that when you go against your instincts, it creates a kind of friction and turmoil inside, which leads to deep subconscious problems which can percolate up to the surface. Or maybe they just are at the surface from the very get-go with something like necrophilia. It may be that somebody loved their spouse so intensely they want to just do it one last time, but so there might be a little bit of love or something mixed in, but as a general rule, it's just kind of pathological, I think. So anyway, let's just move on to something less morbid, which is Yuichiro's next question. I don't know if you've answered this before, but how did you go to the bathroom while living in caves? Inside the cave? Outside? Was there toilet paper? I'm just curious. Okay, well, the only time I went to the bathroom inside of a cave was I'd urinate inside the cave when it was just blazing hot. Or sometimes I'd just be inundated with visitors that I didn't want to meet with, and I'd just hide inside the cave and refuse to come out like the bear at the zoo. And it was kind of a zoo-like feel to it, too. Just people coming and staring at me and just watching me. I was like the weird foreign monk, the weird saintly foreign monk living out in the cave. And sometimes I just didn't want to meet with them, so I just pee in the... It was actually my bath cup. It was this big bowl made out of aluminum. And then I'd dump it outside after the coast was clear or it had cooled down at night. But, yeah, I mean, there are outhouses. As a general rule, even I was one time staying out in the middle of nowhere in this natural cave out in this forest, and there was no outhouse. And for a while I was just crapping on the ground like an animal outside the cave, of course. Some distance away, you don't want flies and stink and so forth. But then within a few weeks, some friendly villagers offered to dig me a latrine. So it didn't really have a ceiling or anything, but at least there was a hole and some boards you could kind of squat over. But toilet paper is not generally used. In Asia, like Burma, you mostly use water, and that's what you're supposed to do for a monk. I mean, there's instructions on everything in life, including using the bathroom. And so there's two main ways of wiping your butt according to ancient Buddhism. First, you use a stick, and then after you've used a stick, which in Burmese is called a ganudan, sometimes people would donate to me little bundles of sticks for wiping my butt. And the best one's got a little bit of bark on them still, so that it's got some traction. And then after you use the stick, then you rinse with water. And I think most monks don't even bother with the stick. They just use water. And it works better than toilet paper. It really does. Like you go to Southeast Asia, like Thailand or Burma, and a lot of bathrooms, even in the city, they'll have like a spray gun right next to the toilet. Like a lot of people have on their kitchen sink. You'll have this spray gun, this hose and the spray thing. And that works better than toilet paper because poop really is water soluble. And then if you're wearing underpants or something, which as a monk you don't do, then you would dab it dry with a paper towel or something. And then stand up and go ahead with your business, go somewhere else and do other things. So, yeah, I mostly did not use toilet paper. I was using, I'd have an outhouse, and then inside the outhouse there'd be like a clay water pot, and then there'd be like half a coconut shell, and then you just go in there and you do your thing, and then you scoop some water out, and you use the cup with one hand, and then you're reaching around the other way with your hand and kind of wiping with your hand, and your hand gets rinsed clean at the same time as your narrow place gets rinsed clean, because, as I say, poop is water soluble. And that has been the way of butt wiping in southern parts of Asia since prehistoric times. I'm pretty sure the Indus Valley civilization did it the same way. And that's you are instructed to do that. And there's all these rules. You're not allowed to throw the butt wiping sticks into the latrine, because then it will fill up the latrine with these sticks that don't biodegrade nearly as fast as poop does, which then causes some monks from Burmese villages who come to America to not throw their crappy toilet paper into the toilet, because technically it's against the rules, and they just throw it into the waste paper basket or something, which is not optimal in the West. So, long story short about using the toilet for monks who live in caves or forests, yeah, there's an outhouse that you go to, and it could be quite a walk, and sometimes you have emergencies in the middle of the night, unlike in the West. I mean, in the West, the whole philosophy of using the bathroom is completely different. It's like you get up and sitting in bed and you're scratching yourself and you're just like, well, what's on my agenda for today? Might as well shower and shave. And then you nonchalantly mosey into the bathroom and do the 3 S's. But in Burma, you sit up on your mat on the floor and you're scratching yourself and it's like, well, what's on my agenda for, whoa, I gotta shit now. And then you it's like you gotta take these fast little baby steps like this, because you gotta like stay clenched until you're there. But I think I'm getting way into TMI territory now. But it's Yuichiro's own fault. He asked for this. But I don't mind. I can talk about this kind of stuff. Let's see. May Yuichiro be happy and well. And no necrophilia. Let's see. Next question is from Chaplin. What are your goals for 2022? Well, see, what are my goals? I'm not extremely goal-oriented. And I think on my old nipapancha.org website, which is in the links below, I've even warned people against goal-oriented Dharma. Just be in the present moment as fully and as consciously as possible, and you're doing, that's like your maximum potential is fulfilled right there. Setting up goals, usually things don't turn out the way you plan. Although, let's see, assuming that I have goals, I do have kind of like objectives or plans. So let's go with that. Number 1 is I'm going to move in with my sweetheart, and we're going to live a long and happy life together. That's one. Also, I'm planning on getting a Glock 19. And if you don't know what a Glock 19 is, then bless your heart. Aside from those 2 things, I really don't have many goals. Just continue doing the best I can, be a good employee, maybe get a raise. I guess. So let's just move on to Chaplin's next question. Have you developed any unexpected hobbies since re-entering lay life? Unexpected hobbies since re-entering lay life? Unexpected ones. Maybe Chaplin has something in mind here, but I'm not thinking of anything. I've gotten to the point where I'm trying to do at least 1 evil Sudoku per day, but I started doing that when I was still a monk, just a few months before I dropped out. That was after the great Adobe Flash Armageddon. I used to play video games, just little puzzle games and that kind of thing, and Google stopped enabling the Flash player where you played most of these, and so I just resorted to doing Sudokus, which is not nearly as entertaining and satisfying, but I've done probably close to 400 of them, solved them successfully, the evil ones, the hardest level. Bragging there, I guess. But let's get back to this question here. Have you developed any unexpected hobbies since re-entering lay life? Unexpected hobbies. I can't think of anything. As I say, maybe Chaplin has something in mind, but I can't think of any. So I'll just move on to the next question. I'll probably think of several after I'm done here. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Well, I could just make a guess. Like I say, I don't really have a plan for where I will be 5 years from now. I wouldn't mind still working at the same job at the sheet metal shop. I really do enjoy it. It's a satisfying job, and everybody gets along and is good friends and friends, and it's nice. Although if the popularity of my books, for example, and they're in the links below, if that really takes off and I'm making enough royalties to live on, then I might stop working at the sheet metal shop, which will give me lots more time to teach Dhamma and do the videos like of my favorite readings and so forth, because really that's just a matter of time and energy is like a limiting factor. time and energy are limiting factors for me now in a way that they weren't when I was still a monk. Unexpected hobbies. So where do I see myself 5 years from now? I'm guessing what it would be most probable, I'll be living in a house with my sweetheart, and we will be mates, and maybe still working at the sheet metal shop. I don't know. We'll just have to see how that goes. Yeah, I'll have a driver's license, and let's see. Yeah, I don't know. Probably not so different from now, except 5 years older, and certainly better established in lay life than I have been over the past several months. And having a mate for 5 years, or actually more than 5 years. So yeah, these projections for the future I'm not very good at, because I just think you just do the best you can in the present moment. And you know, I mean, you can set goals, but yeah, I don't really set a lot of those. So yeah, I'm sorry, I really can't answer that question very well either. How do I see myself 5 years from now? Just living, I hope, happy and healthy with my sweetheart, and we will be a family with dogs and chickens and probably pigs, although the pigs aren't allowed inside the house. And yeah, I assume I'll be better set up than I am now, although I'm not complaining at all. All right, and finally, the last question of them all is from Arain. And Arain asks, can you speak more on the influence of Jainism on Buddhism? Which is kind of an interesting question. And actually, I'm only aware of one big influence of Jainism on Buddhism. And before I get to that, I suppose I should clarify for those of you who aren't familiar with Jainism that it is a religion of India. There are still supposedly about 2 million Jains, and the reputed founder of Jainism, who is called Mahavira by the Jains, which means great hero. In the Buddhist text, he's called Niganta Nataputta, which is Niganta means like one without bonds, and Nataputta is just kind of a joke name to make him sound silly. I think it means something like son of grandson. So it's like radically, in some ways it's similar to Buddhism, and it has similar ancestors to Buddhism. It probably has roots that go all the way back to the Indus Valley civilization. So it's, in some ways it's similar to Buddhism in that, I mean, there's just the standard Indian belief in rebirth or reincarnation. But the way the Jains have it worked out is everyone has their own jiva, or a soul. You know, we were talking about souls earlier. Everyone has their own soul, and karma is like a material substance that sticks to the soul and holds it down on this earth. But if you can purify your soul of all karma, then your soul just wafts up into heaven, and then you live in just paradise, essentially. And so the Jains would deliberately try to get rid of all of their karma, and they've had some really weird ways of doing it. Like, I've read some Jain sutras, and including some of like the rules that Jain monks were required to follow. And there was one, because you're not creating any karma, if you need to cross a river, you have to go, and there's like no bridge. Let's say there's just a boat. You're not allowed to go in a boat if the boat wasn't already going to go over. You can't have somebody take you across just for the sake of taking you across the river, because you'd be making karma that way. So if the boat was already going to go across and you can get into the boat, then you're allowed to do that. But if the boat springs a leak and starts sinking midway, like you're out in the middle of the river and the boat starts to sink, you're not allowed to help bail out the boat, because that would make karma. Because even good karma is karma. You're going to have to get rid of all of it. So what you're supposed to do is, if you're the kind of Jain that wears clothes, because a lot of them were sky-clad, or just they own nothing. They didn't even own a begging bowl. They didn't own clothes. They were just completely naked. But if you were the kind that wore a robe, you were supposed to take your robe off and fold it up and put it on top of your head, just in case that the owner of the boat got so pissed off at you that he threw you overboard, and that way your robes wouldn't get wet. And that's actually in the Jain sutras, these instructions. Like Jain monks, if they were going for alms, they'd be begging for food with their cupped hands, and they weren't allowed to beg for food where there was like a scroungy dog hanging around, because they might be depriving that scroungy dog of food, which would be bad karma. And they weren't allowed to eat any food that was cooked for them specifically, because that would be karma too. They're just supposed to eat leftovers. But if there was like, the scroungy dog or lots of flies around even, you might be depriving the flies of food, not allowed to eat that. So, and also they would torture themselves as a way of just speeding up the process of getting rid of their bad karma. And the Buddha really warned against that, because you're just making more karma through your intention to torture yourself. That was the middle path that the Buddha taught. Like in the first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, there's the path of self-indulgence and the path of self-torture. And nowadays there aren't very many people torturing themselves. But in ancient India, it wasn't just the Jains either. There were like numerous Ajivaka sects. Ajivaka is now extinct. It's a religious system that is now extinct. But, they would literally torture themselves to death. And once the Jain monk figured that he had somehow exhausted all of his karma, he was supposed to just wander off into an isolated area and just squat down and stay in a squatting position until he was dead. Which I assume would be you'd die of thirst and kidney failure first. But anyway, getting back to the chaplain's last question, or Arain's last question here. Can you speak more on the influence of Jainism on Buddhism? The only real influence of Jainism on Buddhism, other than just mentions in the texts, where usually they're being made fun of. Like, I'll tell one of these stories. Like Mahavira, according to the ancient Buddhist texts, Mahavira vomited blood and died because some of his followers had converted to Buddhism. It's probably not true. The Jains themselves don't say this. But Buddhism really is guilty of some anti-un-Buddhist propaganda. So, but anyway, getting back to the question that I keep not answering. The one influence of Jainism on Buddhism, one significant influence that I am aware of, and I think that Ajahn Thanissaro is the one who I learned this from, is that the word asawa, and it's a very common technical word in Buddhism, asawa. And if you're anasawa, that means you're fully enlightened. If you get rid of all of your asawas, you're fully enlightened. And it was originally a Jain term. Asawa, it means something that flows towards you. And for the Jains, that was that sticky karma that weighs down your jiva, or your soul. It flows towards you and sticks and holds you down. But in Buddhism, as is the case with a lot of Vedic terms also, the Buddha or whoever adopted the term changed the meaning of it. So asawa, it's usually translated as, it doesn't even have a standard translation. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi calls it taint. It used to be called canker. Let's see. The Buddhist dictionary originally was calling it bias, which I think is good. But my usual translation for asawa is encumbering influence. Influence also means something that flows towards you. It's fluence is flowing, and in is this way instead of outward. It's in towards you. And so in Buddhism, it can really mean any kind of encumbering influence to me. Just something that you cling to, something that you just adhere to, and it weighs you down. It's like a stumbling block. It's like a burden. It's like in Buddhism they say that another word for term for an arahant is one who lays down the burden, and that burden is the asawas. And the commentarial tradition, or even the later textual tradition, talks about the different kinds of asavas, and I won't really get into that. But the term asava, according to Ajahn Tanisro, I think, was originally borrowed from the Jains, just like a lot of the Buddhist jargon, philosophical jargon, was taken from the Vedic tradition. But Jainism and Buddhism are non-Vedic. They do not accept the Vedas as authoritative, and they're not really offshoots of Vedism. That apparently they have roots that go all the way back into prehistoric, pre-Aryan Indus Valley spiritual systems. And Jainism is similar to Buddhism, and it believes in karma. And there really is no creator god or highest deity, although they do have like the eternal heaven that is kind of similar. But I think I've answered that. And so that was the last question. And so we are done. And it was 2 hours. Gosh, I mean, 2 hours. Who's gonna watch the whole 2 hours? Like I'm Joe Rogan or something. But anyway, that's it. And like I say before, the URL links are below, including the links to my books. And I apologize for taking so long. I hope things will run more smoothly next time. And if you are willing to ask questions, if you're curious about anything, I mean, ask me anything really. Although I'm most likely to be able to answer in accordance with Buddhist philosophy, like, ask questions about Buddhism or what it's like living in Burma, or about me personally. I'm more likely to be able to give an educated, intelligent answer with regard to that sort of thing. But hit me with your best shot. You can ask me poop questions even if you want to, and be happy.